A new government has already brought a new opportunity to reset Australia's relationship with China, but fundamental grievances will remain. Chief among them is the ongoing detention of Australian journalist Cheng Lei. Cheng Lei has now been incarcerated for nearly 2 years. The anchor for Chinese state TV broadcasts has been charged with suspicion of illegally supplying state secrets overseas. Allegations she strongly denies. Her case came before the courts in March, where a verdict was deferred. And Sky News can now reveal China has stopped allowing all consular visits and all virtual access has been blocked. And for the first time, we can exclusively reveal the identity of Cheng Lei's partner. Nick Coyle is the outgoing head of the Australian Chamber of Commerce in Beijing and had to leave China because of threats to his own safety. He is not the parent of Cheng Lei's Melbourne-based children, but is the long-term partner, her long-term partner and boyfriend. He's now speaking on the record for the first time. Our Sky News reporter Annalise Nielsen spoke to Nick, who hopes the new Albanese government will make further progress than its predecessor.
So tell us about the day you realised that she'd gone missing.
Yeah, that was actually August. It's an easy one for me to remember because my birthday's on August 14. We had spoken the day before and she was going to come and join me for some birthday drinks. That was on a Friday night. And then I hadn't heard from her that day on my birthday, and then I thought that's unusual, but I thought, you're in the TV business. I know people get busy and there's deadlines and there's, a whole range of things that could have distracted us. So I was like, I didn't think too much of it. And then later on that evening, probably, I can't remember, it was about 7 o'clock, I guess, some friends of hers started calling me and going, look, we haven't seen her for 24 hours now. And I was like, yeah, no, neither have I. So then I tried to call her and phone was off. And so I decided, well, I won't panic stations yet. And then tried to call her again later that night, nothing. So I ended up going around to the apartment the next morning with a friend of hers who unfortunately got detained later on, and to check on her well-being, because at that stage we weren't living together, but it was an apartment we used to share together. And then, went into the apartment and everything kind of looked normal until I could see that all the electronic devices, computers, all those sorts of things were gone. And then it was pretty obvious to me then what had happened,
Oh my God, what did that feel like, that moment when you realised that the electronics were gone?
Oh, I know this sounds really weird, but at least it made sense, I mean, in those sorts of situations, somebody goes missing for a day, and a half, you can think worse things could happen. And I was like, okay, at least, and then the practical side of you, there's the oh shit moment of what does this mean? But then the practical side kicks in, right, what do we do? So I rang a friend of mine, phoned a friend of mine at the embassy, went and interrupted his lunch and said, hey, this is what's happened, this is what I found, do you think I'm overreacting? He was like, no, you're not overreacting. And then I went in to see other people at the embassy to talk to them about what I'd discovered. Yeah, they hadn't been notified of anything, but said, look, you can go to the police and notify them that she's missing. I kind of thought about that. Well, what's the point? It's clearly been detained. The question is by whom? Right? In China, there could be a range of different organisations that may detain you. So really, didn't see the point of doing that. So decided to wait until there was notification. The embassy let me know that, they have to be notified within 3 working days of any Australian being detained. So waited for that. The next morning, they called me and said, pop on in, and then let me know that she'd been detained by the Ministry of State Security. That's probably when I was like, yeah, this is not good. I knew the system well enough to know that that's a pretty difficult one. Yeah. So
I think this is the thing we both still find incredibly frustrating. Do you have any idea what she's supposed to have done?
No, unfortunately not. So what's been, reported in the media and the statements that have been made by, by the Foreign Minister in Australia and then the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in China. That's all we know. There's no.
And that tells us nothing.
No.
And quite seriously, we've brainstormed this. We've tried to figure out what she could have possibly done.
Yeah.
And really, it does just seem like at the end of the day, she was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
We just don't know. I mean, it's very difficult to work out. I mean, she's somebody who wasn't involved in politics. That wasn't her world. I mean, I probably had more of an interest in what was going on in Chinese politics than she did, So the idea that she was, if you like, focused on the political issues in Australia and China, she just wasn't. I mean, she was a straight-up business reporter, frankly, and actually liked the fact that her world was about business because obviously working for a Chinese state broadcaster, as you would well know, there are certain lanes you need to stay in. And, if you're a business reporter and have a business program, well, you can pursue pretty much anything you want to pursue, right? Because it's not, generally speaking, not politically very sensitive. What's happening with this company or that company in China and what Chinese companies are doing going abroad and so on and so forth. So she wasn't somebody who was all that interested in politics. So it doesn't make any sense to me. It never has.
I think one of the things that did become political around her was, and I think people in Australia don't appreciate this because she wasn't well known here. In China, she was a well-known face of Australia.
Yes, very.
And they made a lot of that connection, and I think that's what really put a target on her back.
Who knows? I mean, yeah, she was extremely giving of her time to the Australian community.
Okay, so there's a few reasons you've decided to speak out now.
Yeah.
One of them is we're extremely concerned about her well-being.
Yeah.
It seems to have gone a lot worse quite quickly.
Yeah, so there's been regular monthly consular visits which have been suspended at the moment, apparently due to COVID-19 related restrictions in Beijing, and that was communicated to the embassy and then obviously communicated to me and her family. I find that just totally unacceptable. I mean, these monthly consular visits have literally been what's kept her going for 20 months. I mean, she's been able to make no phone calls with anybody. She's had, maybe 3 visits from her lawyer just to prepare for the trial. She's not had one phone call with family, with her children, nothing, nada. And so the monthly consular visits, I mean, that's your only window to the outside world is this 30 minutes. And those visits, by the way, they're not in person. The embassy, go to a Chinese government facility, then it's a video call. So at the moment, those visits are effectively suspended indefinitely. We don't know when they may restart. It could be next week, it could be next month, it could be 3 months, it could be, Shanghai's been locked down for 80 days now. So there's a consular agreement that says our officials should be able to see every Australian detainee every month. And the idea that COVID should prevent that is just ridiculous. And it's unacceptable. I mean, there's having been in the Chinese system myself, lived there. If they wanted to put an exemption in for Australian officials, require them to have them, they'd have to get tested before they go anyway. Have a PCR test, or even do a day's quarantine or a couple of days quarantine before they visit her. They'd do that, and have that video call. So that really concerns me at the moment, big time.
And I mean, just from what we know of the conditions from the last visits too, we have some serious concerns about her health. Yeah.
I mean, it's been an issue all through the 20, 21 months of her detention has been her health. I mean, fortunately, we're dealing with about the strongest person I know, mentally, emotionally. But there have been some really difficult health challenges along the way, yeah. And, you know, she joked with me in one of the consular visits, in one of her messages to me, that my Starbucks coffee would probably, you know, I spend more on that than her week's worth than MSS is spending on,
they are expensive.
on her food,
yeah.
you know, and it's inadequate, and she's really struggled with a range of different health issues as a result. And yeah, most recently, you know, with severe, you know, I don't know how much she wants me to say, but you know, severe constipation, shall we say? But it's been tough. It's
indelicate, but when she's been kept on a diet of raw rice, like, it's going to make a person sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, there was.
And this is real. This is her life.
And there was excuses given. There's, you know, because of COVID and food restrictions. Now, there's been no food restrictions in Beijing.
Yeah.
I know that. You know, I talk to people there literally every day. So the idea that, you know, the detention centre couldn't get adequate food, again, it's not acceptable. It really isn't. Yeah.
And that's the last we've heard. Now we have no way to know if it's gotten worse.
Correct. So that was on the last visit was the 21st of April. And then we haven't had a visit since. And so far as we know, the visits are off indefinitely.
And I know we've really wanted to protect her kids in all this. We haven't wanted to drag any more media attention on them when they're dealing with such a difficult time.
Correct.
But how are they going? And do you have any update?
They're okay. They're dealing with things as well as they can deal with them. I think it's tough, you know. And, you know, kids are resilient. So I'm sure that in time, you know, they'll get through it. But that's just even more reason why she needs to be back. You know, and that's the thing. It's not about me. You know, it's about her and her kids. That's why she needs to be back. And I mean, I don't know. I can't imagine what it would be like for them, you know, to be in this situation. I mean, people lose a parent, you know, that happens, and that's tragic and it's awful. But to have a situation where you haven't lost your parent, there isn't any closure in that sense. You're just stuck somewhere. And it's not like they're too young to understand. They absolutely understand. And it's awful. And for her, and I really feel for her mum and dad. You know, her mum and dad have gone through hell as well through this. You know, so it's awful.